Hey, it's Jonathan. Thanks so much for listening to Good Authority. In this week's episode, I wanted to share some time with you talking about AI, but in a way that I don't think is being talked about enough, about the morality of it, the ethics of it, and how we, especially if you're like me, a non-technical founder or a non-technical executive, can think about this incredible technology and use it for good. We've seen over the years, with every new generation of technology, the technologists, the people for whom that technology is familiar and is in their comfort zone, they will use that technology in whatever ways they deem appropriate. Some for good, often in manipulative and exploitive ways. And I think we've seen really clearly the last generation of technology, social media, smartphones, mostly has led us to a not great set of outcomes. We can focus on the obvious things like the damage that it's doing to children and the lack of accountability among social media and big tech for the damage and the harm that they have caused with these tools and devices and the way that they are engineered and organized. But we have a new problem, and it's really important for folks like you to get involved in the way this technology is going to be used, because even more than social media, even more than smartphones, even more than the internet or screens more broadly, AI is changing our world at a pace that is so dramatic and in many ways hard to detect, that if people who have strong morals and values, people who come from a strong philosophical foundation, if you don't get involved or if you reject the technology out of principle and say, oh, I don't want to be a part of that, well, we're going to be left with the usual purveyors of technology and their perspective and their morals or lack thereof, where they will push technology and use cases onto us in ways that they would never allow their own families to use. So this is hugely important at a societal level, even though it's early stage for this piece of technology, even though like all new technologies, it will go through the hype cycle. Maybe we're at the beginning of the end of the initial hype and it'll go into a dormant phase, maybe, for a while. But with AI, everything's going so quickly that dormant phase may not last very long. So let's not get distracted by the public battles between the big personalities in the AI space. Let's talk about how we can think about that as consumers, as professionals, as parents, as members of our society, and how do we want those tools to be used? I would offer it's never been more important for us, for our own sake and for the sake of our children, to get it right. So I want to start by sharing a little bit of how I'm approaching it and why I'm approaching it the way that I did. As somebody who is not an engineer, I don't have a computer science background, but I am very tech forward. As folks who know me, who've worked with me over the years, I'm an early adopter for just about any new form of technology. I'm fascinated by it. I believe in technology to make the world better in spite of all of the challenges that I just laid out. And when I saw this technology emerge, at least in terms of the popular view of it, where we started to be able to see what AI was, even though people have been building AI for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, thinking about AI since the 1940s, and certainly in our sci-fi collective conscience, it's been there for a long time. But it really went public, so to speak, in early 2023. For me, in my world, as an organizational design, culture, leadership thinker, author, most of the folks in my world looked at it and were terrified. And they thought, oh, this is going to take my job. This is going to put me out of business. And I didn't see it that way. My first reaction to seeing this technology was interesting. there's actually a way, or there might be a way, to solve a problem that I've been trying to solve for close to 10 years, which is, how do I coach outside of the 1 hour that I get to spend with one human much more broadly? Is there a way? Can there be a way? What would it look like for me to be able to advise or coach or interact with 1,000 people at a time, 1 million people at a time, 1 billion people at a time, where the degradation of the ideas that I wanted to teach people, the degradation was zero or approaching zero? What if the AI could replicate the types of questions, the types of guidance, could learn the context the way a human could, whether that was in the field of coaching or wellness or fitness or relationships or finance, it doesn't matter. In the world of trying to help somebody else, what if people who are passionate about helping other people, and one of them, there's a lot of us out there in many, many walks of life, what if there was a way that we could do that? People who have a strong set of values, a strong set of ideas, a body of work, a moral perspective on the world, who wanted to help, what if we could scale ourselves? So that was what was intriguing to me about this tool. And it offered, at least theoretically, conceptually, a way to do it in a way that none of the other cycles of technology could touch. Not e-learning, not performance management, not webinars, not training programs, not coaching programs, where we would introduce ideas, but there was this really high dilution from introducing an idea to people's ability to practice, interact with those ideas, apply those ideas, implement those ideas in their daily life. It is the most challenging part of adult learning, because adult learners lose 90% of what they've learned the moment they leave the quote unquote classroom, whatever that classroom looks like. That's just the nature of it. So I remember thinking back when I read the Amazon reviews early on, when I was starting to think about writing Good Authority, and how does this book fit into the market, and how is this different than other leadership books out there? I was surprised and mortified to see that there were 35,000 books ostensibly about leadership on Amazon at that time. That was 2015. There's probably 70,000 now. And I thought to myself, how am I ever going to differentiate these set of ideas from the other ones? But over the last 8 years, what I realized is that's not actually the problem. Good Authority stood on its own. Lots of people bought it. Lots of companies came along and did the things that we do over at Refound and over at Ren these days. But I had the same problem that the 34,999 other people who had written leadership books had, which was, even if the ideas in this book are good, even if people want to adopt this perspective, it's very, very difficult to do. It's not clear how to implement those ideas. So I became very interested in what AI could do, what was this potential for this thing called generative AI. And in the early days of experimenting with it, this was, coming on 16 months ago. And again, I'm a non-technical founder. I'm not an engineer. I can't write code. Wouldn't know the first thing about how to approach that. Although I do have experience managing product teams and being involved in software development, at least as an executive. So I knew enough to be able to sponsor and author a project. But what I found was remarkable. And this is why I want you to get involved in whatever this looks like for you, whether you're in education, government, for-profit, not-for-profit, business owner, working in a corporation. AI has the potential to help us solve one of our biggest problems, which is our ability to talk to each other. And in this year, an election year here in the US, it's on full display, where if we ever had it, about half of us, the 25% on the far left and the 25% on the far right, maybe it's 30 and 30, maybe I'm being optimistic there, have almost no ability to talk to each other and to understand another perspective other than our own, and to get out of an intellectual bubble, a closed system of ideas that we are in, whether we think we're in it or not, right or left. And there was an interesting set of articles that came out this week that I want to give voice to, where people were talking about a bunch of organizations in the middle, and they've always been there, but they're getting louder. People trying to find ways to bridge some of these seemingly intractable divides. But if we leave it to the social media companies, nothing will change. If we leave it to the mainstream media or the so-called alternative media, nothing will change, because all of those media properties, the ones that we all see out there, the CNNs and the NBCs and the Foxes, those are the obvious ones. But all the ones on YouTube, those are media properties, and they are there to do one thing and one thing only, which is to make money, to get you to click on things. And the more inflammatory and the more outrageous those things are, the more likely we are to click on them, and they make money, and they will keep doing that. Rinse and repeat ad infinitum. So we need a different set of interventions. We need a different way of talking with each other. And I don't think we're going to fix social media personally. I don't think that's salvageable. It's pretty painful when you go on most social media channels. Some are better than others. There's a lot of people using it for good. That's for sure true. And in other parts of the world, one of the things to remember is that it's a way to organize and to fight corruption and autocracy and dictatorship in other parts of the world in a way that we don't presently have that challenge. Here in the US, we deal with a lot of censorship. Even though we don't like to admit it, we're dealing with a lot of censorship these days. Some of us don't like to admit it anyway. So for me, AI has the benefit of being a clean slate for a while. And what I've decided to do is to put some of my eggs in that basket to see if we can move the needle when it comes to leadership and management in the company context. That's what we're doing over at Ren. You can check that out at rencoach.com if you want to check it out. You can create a free account. It's not about raising awareness for that company here today. It's just an example of somebody like me, somebody like you, who isn't the usual suspect to build a technology company. But this is what AI allows me to do and what it allows you to do. And there's another element here that is really important to consider, and it's really related to the building of products themselves. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a technical person to build an AI product. Now, it's true, you didn't have to be a technical leader or an engineer to build a product before AI, but it was a lot easier. These days, the challenges that you face as a founder or a business owner or an entrepreneur in the AI space, the technology itself is not generally the problem. Figuring out how to write the code. There are now co-pilots that can write code for you. It's really around the context and the opinion of that software and the perspective of that software and the way you analyze the information that comes out of that AI-powered or AI-dedicated software. So it becomes a much more human activity to run a software company these days, from my perspective. And that's a good thing, because the more diverse the founders are of the companies that are influencing and having their worldview expressed to all of us as consumers, the more that those founders are coming from a broader intellectual background, the better, from my perspective, and I think from yours. So these are incredibly interesting times. They are incredibly divided times. They are times where information and facts are not what they seem, where the only intelligent position relative to social media, and I mean anything you see on social media, the only intelligent, mature position is, I don't believe what that person is saying. That's the only intelligent position to take. That you have to do your own research. You have to look at who that person is, where they're coming from, where do they get their money, who are their benefactors. Every single source of information on the internet is to be not trusted. That's the first principle that we all have to take we have to be much more skeptical, like 1,000 times more skeptical of the things that we are consuming via social media. Part of that is because they're really good at convincing you they're credible. They're really good at convincing you that they've done the research. They're really good at citing papers, citing academics, citing other people to buttress their flimsy tribal points of view on both sides. And it's really compelling. It's really the entertainment, the media, the production value is so high. It's easy to get confused as consumers to think that what we're looking at is a piece of journalism, and it's almost never that. And of course, even in mainstream media, as we heard from Lou Simons in one of our earliest episodes, there are no newsrooms left in the traditional sense, where stories are vetted, where editors are really doing the work of editing, where it's not based in a for-profit model that's based in efficiency and creating a set of clicks that match a revenue model. So we have to become much more educated consumers relative to those forms of media and AI. We have to become much more literate. You don't have to understand how an LLM operates, but you got to know what an LLM is. You don't have to understand the ins and outs of how to build a software product and the revenue models and the business models. That's not important for most people. But over the next 12 to 18 months, a new set of business models are going to emerge that we haven't seen yet. Just like with the internet, we didn't realize that, as has often been said, if you don't know what the product is you. And we all let ourselves, wittingly and mostly unwittingly, become the product from the Facebooks and the Twitters and all the advertising-based models out there, Google, who were monetizing our attention. And we let it happen. We didn't take quick enough, decisive enough action to protect ourselves, to protect our children. We have another opportunity. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I would love to engage with you, to support you in any way that I can, with any idea that you have to engage in this territory. If you've never started a business before, I'd love to help. If you've started 10 businesses before, I'd love to help. What I'm really interested in, and part of what I want this show to be about, even though it's not a show about AI, it's not a show about technology, it's a show about leadership. And we need better, more thoughtful, moral leaders in every facet of our culture and every field of expertise in our world. And AI is one of many, but it's a really important one. So thank you for letting me get on my soapbox a little bit. I hope that this inspires you. I hope that it scares you a little bit. And I hope it motivates you to get involved and get your heart and mind around this technology. Because if we don't change, the change will come to us. And it will do things to us and do things to our children. It will change our neurobiology. This is a foreign concept to us until recently, that a piece of technology could literally change the chemistry in our mind and the chemistry in our bodies. We've now seen it once. We're in the middle to the end of that experiment where we have seen that technology now has the power to make physiological, biological, neurobiological changes in us as humans. AI is that on steroids. So let's be ready. Let's be smart. Let's collaborate. Let's work with each other and make sure that this technology gets out into the market the right way. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for listening to Good Authority. If you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to get subscribed and leave us a review over at Apple or Spotify or both. You can share the episode with friends, family, colleagues, and maybe even your arch enemy. And you'll be getting new episodes every Wednesday. Thanks so much for listening.